hearing the tones. I'm coming live just a few minutes after being basically woke up from half sleep related to an issue that I was actually dealing with in my mind while dozing. And I want to remind people that when I do these live sessions, they're not always the most respected from others, because what I am dealing with as Brenda's soul is often more about her own lack of understanding about others, quote, religious understandings of who they are versus the values they hold. And this is why we want people to understand that when we say that no fear is where Brenda operates, she comes on live knowing very well that some people who love her, adore her, and cherish her also have their own values that they vibrate in beautifully. They focus on the beauty of who they are and others most often, and yet they are vibrating in books of old that have those, quote, devil/Satan visions in them. Now, when someone like Brenda says, I'm not having to deal with their souls anymore, it means she's literally disconnected from the whole of the family that tries to believe that that is what she's working with. Do you know what it's like to hear those family members come to you with love and adoration and say, I'm sorry. I didn't know what I was doing. Versus those on the other side of the veil who are saying, I participated in that kind of activity where I was creating devil worship, Satan, Lucifer, crucifixes, and assuming that I could make people hurt who were utilizing or using me as an outlet for their aggression. So I want to talk to you about what that means. This doesn't mean that this is for everyone, and especially those who value their lives, correct? Many who utilize those souls as weapons for their own liking of it. That's what Brenda was dealing with certain people. Those who are saying, I like utilizing those weapons of words and souls as tools of aggression towards others due to my own lack of understanding of where I myself get that handed back to me. It is a revenge cycle that Brenda was on with her family, correct? It has nothing to do with her family. So we want to be very clear about that kind of issue. Now, when Brenda realized she was dealing with someone else's family tree, it was more about the nature of this soul is so hurt that they utilize those visions in their own defense against others, thinking that I will call upon the dark in order to be of the light, to protect myself from visions, right? Brenda doesn't even buy into it. And she has told people over and over, you are what you vibrate in, not what you say you are. So those who are in the vision of, I'm going to hurt others with my words and weapons, are just as guilty of oppression of others, quote, love of life, as those who are doing it on a physical level, is what some would say. Brenda bypasses their heart and says, I'm not here to take your emotionally abusive vision, because that is an emotionally abusive vision to plant those words of, quote, love into the minds of those who cannot handle the vibration or the wisdom of it. Now, when people start to think about what Brenda is saying, they would start to understand, I better get my act together. I better start utilizing my wisdom that others are telling me, that I am not here to tell people who they are. We understand people are afraid of people like me who can handle the vibration of those who are saying to themselves, I utilize this tool of love, right? It is a weapon of demoralization for many who utilize those books of old. They are lifted up only to see the bad in others. Correct? That is what they're receiving right now. That is what those souls receive on the other side of the veil if they are in the vision of, I looked at others as evil. I placed them in a vibration in my heart that was to do the work of the devil. Right? This is not about worshiping the devil. It's about those who are still utilizing the tools and weapons that it enhanced for many, who said, we utilize it to hurt others rather than to rise above that vision for ourselves. So we want people to think very carefully about how their own priests, preachers, ministers, whomever, or those who just read those books on their own, have their own experiences of negativity and decide that it must be about somebody else. So, what you as a soul would say is, my suggestion would be to align with those who already have deconstructed the nature of what those vibrations are. Allow yourself to vibrate in the beauty of it. Question those who keep repeating the negativity that's aligned within those words. And ask yourself, how does Brenda do it? She is very kind and gentle on the soul level. She sticks up for us who are not about to take the abuse from those books. Let's put it that way. It vibrates in the abuse of souls. Most often in certain people's minds. Okay? Many are saying, I got the idea to create those other books of darkness from the nature of, I want to vibrate there for a power trip or for an experience of love that I was not prepared for. And that's where Brenda has friends who did that work. What do you think that means? Is this here to show you the most loving and caring souls can get trapped in a vibration when their family tree member decides that's the way I'm going to go? Okay, so this is about aligning with the hearts and minds of those souls who were negligent in their upbringing and decided to take that on as a challenge for themselves to see what they could produce. Now, this is why many will say, I'm not even going to watch these videos anymore because it scares me. It's not a scare thing. Brenda just stood up for everybody. You plant those seeds of putting those vibrations on others, you're placing it on yourself. So you might want to deconstruct the idea that it's no longer really valid for the majority of the people because they aren't walking and talking in it 24/7. That's the beautiful vibration that we can offer all of those who now are, quote, afraid. This isn't about fear. It's about deconstructing your own memories of what that was like. I have people who are memorizing those words and they hear it playing out in their minds. Now, for Brenda, she doesn't even bother with it, and she's grateful she didn't have to deal with it. But what I do for the sake of others is help them rise out of the nature of I need to have such a demonic possession is what others would say this is. So she's dealing with someone who's trying to create the fear and the negativity around the idea of aligning with your highest vision of love, which says what? This is about understanding, not about fear. It's about realizing many are beautiful and looking into those words of wisdom to rise out of that vibration. But in essence, many are also utilizing those books to place it upon others. Now, there is a forgiveness cycle that Brenda always operates in. She knows that there is no, quote, ill intent for the majority of people. But if you are indeed looking out at others and saying they are evil or they are the devil or whatnot, you have placed that vision upon yourself. Think carefully about what that does for people. Now we're going to highlight an example. Brenda heard a quick message before she came on. She actually heard two. One of them was, there's a 5-alarm fire in San Francisco, and that was of the past. But it would have been helpful for many had they heard the vision of it's going to be okay. Okay. And then Brenda heard the message about all of us in Morocco love you. So Brenda was getting a message from the highest vision of those who are saying our books of old are cherished, adored, and loved. However, if they don't rise out of the victimhood of those words, they can sit in it a little too long. And Brenda was saying, I'm done with those who are trying to utilize those words in a way that is emotionally abusive. Not only to me, but to my children, perhaps, right? We have children who are opening up on this plane from a place of love of self and others, who are also in the vision of mentally challenged, right? So we want people to start to understand, those of us who are saying, I can bring you your own soul from a place of love, is very much of that vision. That's where they vibrate. It's your challenge to start fearing those who are feared, correct? No, this is about Brenda saying, I don't need to, quote, deal with those in the way in which they were portraying myself. I'm not here to cast stones, right? But I'm also not here to stay in the victimhood of someone else's, quote, book. You can rise in your books of love. You can have whatever you want happen. But we want people to really, really think about that Christ soul that they think they're operating in and ask themselves, what would the devil say about his soul, right? It's not for him to determine. You yourselves get to choose who you want to align with in this world. Do you want to align with those who lift us up into the nature of, I love and adore your soul, because in essence, your soul is loved and adored as well for me. So what happens when we have those issues of a planetary alignment, right? Most people are not utilizing victimhood to create that kind of energy for others. I have people who are afraid of the devil, who vibrate in that vision and who are projecting that vision out. I have others who in their past only and are forgiven always, immediately, who go into the vision of, I utilize that as a tool of weaponry or aggression. I'm not here to tell you who it is. They're very aware of the potentials, and by saying one thing and vibrating in the vision in another is a completely different understanding. Just because I say I'm of the light does not grant it to me. A statement of intent is what that is. Saying I'm of hope and change, right? That's Barack Obama's wisdom of the moment. We rise out of the victimhood of our souls very fast. We want hope and change. How do we do that? We let go of those who are vibrating in the beauty of who they are by throwing others under the bus in their minds. I don't need to project that those who utilize those books are in that vibration, but it is more about what are they doing with those books of old that are allowing people to hate themselves so much that they would place that on another. That's the high of the high. That's the high of the high, because in essence, those are tools of separation from each other. So it's not meant to scare people or to hinder people's expression of beauty in whatever way they want to, but it's about allowing people then to start to understand that when we align with certain industries, this is the healthcare industry. Brenda's getting hijacked now because in essence, there's a message for her family tree. She got her validation about the cancer message yesterday, about who it was that succumbed to the battle of cancer. And his soul was of that vision. In essence, he says, my soul has been survived by many, right? So he's being lifted up in his mind with his family tree. And he says, I honor all those who understand now. I never did have that vision placed upon me, correct? They were of that kind of vision of worshiping the heavenly realms, and the devil realms were part of what was placed upon his heart due to the nature of who he was in his vision as he portrayed himself here. And he's saying it rises out of that. There's no fear of the unknown. But many who are in that vision here don't realize that they are intently, describing themselves as of that, and saying, I'm casting them out and whatnot. Brenda is just saying, I won't have to deal. I will not align with those who are utilizing tools of aggression towards myself or my family. And that's the nature of sticking up for not only myself, but my loved ones and for all of humanity. Because I can tell you right now that while many are utilizing those words of wisdom in beautiful ways, there are plenty out there who are casting stones and telling people or projecting out. You don't have to say it, but it's what you vibrate in. So if you vibrate in the beauty of projection of love, guess what you're going to receive? You're going to receive the love. That's why Brenda received it from a beautiful place and time within the nature of our honesty of Morocco is behind her. It's not just about the Christian agenda. It's not just about the Islamic revolution. It's not just about the visions of Muslim identification or whatnot. Those books are beautiful for what they are in their moments. But people are now starting to understand when Brenda says there's a future event regarding San Francisco, it's the place and time in which she vibrated, right? People are thinking, oh, that's a past event. It's not about the gay population there. So we're also going to talk about the nature of how people are going to look at the future and say, oh, there must be something wrong there. There's no right or wrong on the highest levels. It's about the nature of understanding. The Seth material is one thing that Brenda wants to bring through. I would encourage everyone not just to read the first book. I would encourage people to read many of those books, they will give you a completely different understanding of how we create and why you would not want to focus your attention on those around us as bad or evil or whatnot. Okay? It's also a creative endeavor of how we create the situations in which we vibrate. Why is our country under attack? Let's look at that, right? Why is our vibration under attack, right? Brenda isn't under attack, but she was not knowing it due to the nature of my suggestions of love were not good enough for her family. My suggestions of love were not good enough for those who had the wisdom that there are souls. They would say, oh, this proves my point. There are people there to be afraid of. I'm not afraid of people. I just stand up for myself. There are people all around us that are indeed doing various things. But what we do is we don't vibrate in their vision as devils. And this is what I want Brenda to understand. She was more about deconstructing the vision of Christ, right? No, she knows there's that vision that's also coming through it's not the next century, but it's throughout this century into the next century. That's where a lot of this stuff is getting deconstructed. It's wise for people to start thinking about the vibration of my materials or the vibration of my heart. Okay? Brenda forgives all in a heartbeat. She doesn't blame people for being led astray. That's how she looks at those books. They're being led astray in many ways. If indeed they're being utilized to harm others with their minds. She dealt with this from the idea of the love vibration. Look at someone that's doing wrong in your mind and cast a stone with your thoughts by saying, I'm going to bless them with the opposite vibration. You've just seen something in somebody else that you yourself are aligning with. Versus looking at everyone, and this is a very high wisdom, that says, I no longer need to look at people as good or bad. They're in a state of being that is more about what's going on for them in that moment. They're not necessarily always vibrating in it. So this is more about those who are not careful, right? No, it's not about it because you don't want to walk around on eggshells. But for those who are on a daily basis placing, guilt, blame, shame, violence, and aggression, everyone's looking around versus seeing people for the beauty of who they are. And that's what Brenda did with her family member of soul, right? I have a family member who's saying, I rose out of that stuff very fast because it was a condemnation of my family tree. Right? So we're not condemning the books at all in essence. We're here to learn when we let go of those books as tools of aggression versus inspiration. So those who are in those books need to ask themselves, am I utilizing this to bless and love everybody? Or am I utilizing this to hold others, quote, accountable for their, quote, sins? Accountability is always there within reach, right? That's why Brenda says, I'm personally responsible and accountable for my thoughts and my actions. Are you? Now, it doesn't mean that we go around looking at people as if they're devils, correct? But she knows people who do that vision. Okay? Do you want to know what it's like to know enough about the neurobiology and the psychology within the field of vision of my personality type does not operate like 99% of the people on this planet? And yet we were looked at as the weird ones, the strange ones, the rejected ones, because we were able to tap into the beauty of who we are as souls very easily, right? Not all of us. It's not everyone. But there are enough differences in the brain for others to start to look at someone as their behavior is outrageous and must be condemned, versus those who say we are all loved, adored, and cherished for all of our diversity in every way in which we can bring it through. Okay, so this isn't a condemnation. It's just a helpful reminder not to focus too much on people who went through that, but remember the beauty. So even if you have people who are in that vision, they also rise in the beauty of who they are or who they were, depending on whether or not they are still here with us on this side of the veil or not. It's really, there's an unveiling for most of us. And that's why Brenda says, I understand people who are being told various lies about others, they might want to stop and say, who is saying the truth? Are we going to vibrate in the beauty of everybody, or are we going to sit back and cast stones towards those who don't act or look like we do? Okay. And it's very much true with the love vibration. It does not mean that we have to hang around or excuse the behavior as anything less than love for their souls, but we do not have to vibrate in the idea that I have to take someone else's abusive behavior and place it upon my heart as that's the way to be. So those are the choices that people need to make in their world. Who do I align with and why? Do I want to know the truth is what people really need to start asking themselves, because this is the nature of the revealing of the truths of our hearts, right? There's also soul level understanding. So Brenda's just given you a taste of what that vision is. And Morocco is still on the line saying we honor our hearts. We're having a hard time in Morocco as well. So that gives you a little bit of a bump up in what she's receiving and why. So with that, we want to say thank you for watching. And always remember, as Brenda was guided, someone is saying the crossing of ourselves does nothing except show our fear towards others for the most part. It's known. Anyways, the vision of love for many is within that crossing as well. But many of her souls who do that are also doing it in the name of their fear. And we say fear is just a vibration. It's nothing more than a step into it and ask yourself, what am I truly afraid of in this moment? That's why I'm able to do what I do, because I step into the fear of the moment. I'm not afraid to tell you who you are. I'm not afraid to tell you what you do when you go to those visions. But I'm not here to cast stones on a public forum, unless there is a forum that is one of respect and love always. That's where I operate. But the nature of truth-telling can often be taken as a negative. But if you start to do the visions of, I'm here to hand you your hearts, which means I give you the love from your family tree always. It's not just your family tree. We're all here. Those are those higher wisdoms of, yeah, there are plenty of people who operate in horrible circumstances. And they rise very carefully in their vision of, I love who I am. And I love my family, right? That's why we want people to understand it's not the easiest position to be in, but it is where we are and how we vibrate in the truth-telling of visions. If we don't have the truth, how many people can understand why Brenda says, I wouldn't be able to do what I do on a soul level as well as with those who I love and adore, in bringing through those souls who have passed, who have crossed over, who say, I'm free and clear from any, quote, devil vibration. I never was placed in it in my heart, and my mind is free and clear of it. And that is the nature of the love of all. And with that, we want to say thank you for watching. And remember, as always, be graceful in your wisdom. Be graceful in your wisdom. So have a wonderful day.